There are Christmas specials that feel festive, and then there are Christmas specials that feel like home, quietly, softly, and without ever trying too hard. A Charlie Brown Christmas has always fallen into that second category for me, the kind of story that moves with an unassuming tenderness, like a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine. Growing up as an Australian, my Christmases were spent in either an air-conditioned house or under the patio of a backyard so as to not let the 40-degree sun scorch my skin, mozzies and flies buzzing around like uninvited guests. And the closest thing we had to snow was the white foam that clung to our beers or the fizzle of a cold refreshing soft drink we drank to stay cool. Yet somehow, this little American TV special, with its snow-covered streets, children bundled in woolen hats, and a schoolyard that looked like it belonged to someone else's winter, wrapped itself around me with a familiarity I never questioned. It was as if Charles Schulz himself had tapped into something far more universal than mere seasonal scenery. What always struck me about the Charlie Brown Christmas wasn't just its simplicity, but its sincerity. Even as a child, long before I even thought about caring about themes or subtext, I knew this special felt different from the loud, sparkly Christmas entertainment that dominated the season on repeat every single Christmas. It didn't bombard you with jokes, or glitter, or oversized exaggerated emotions. Instead, it sat beside you, almost as if it were listening as much as it was speaking. Its soft jazz soundtrack, its childlike animation, its hesitant line deliveries, all of it added up to something disarmingly simple. And for someone who spent holidays with barbecues instead of fireplaces and poolside swims instead of sleigh rides, this story became a kind of window into a winter I never experienced but somehow grew to emotionally understand. A Charlie Brown Christmas isn't just a yearly rewatch, it has become a gentle reminder of what the holiday season can feel like when stripped of commercial noise, vulnerable, reflective, and quietly full of hope. There is a very particular emotional frequency that the Charlie Brown Christmas tunes itself to, one that exists somewhere between confusion and quiet sadness, filtered through the honesty of childhood. Charlie Brown's melancholy is not exaggerated or theatrical, it is deeply internal, expressed through sighs, slumped shoulders, and half-finished sentences that trail off as though he's unsure whether his feelings are even worth articulating. As someone who's always loved peanuts, this emotional restraint feels intentional rather than limiting. It mirrors the way children often process complex feelings, not with elaborate explanations, but with instinctive discomfort. Charlie Brown doesn't know exactly what's wrong with Christmas, he only knows that it doesn't feel the way everyone insists it should, and that uncertainty, that inability to name the problem, is what makes his struggle so recognizable. Even as a kid myself, watching from the heat-soaked distance of an Aussie summer, I understood that sensation immediately. The feeling that joy was expected of you, but somehow hadn't yet arrived. That soft sadness feels even more profound because of how casually it's treated by those around him. There's no villain here, just neglect, misunderstanding, and the natural self-absorption of children. Yet this only manages to sharpen the ache Charlie Brown feels. He is not asking for solutions or applause, he is asking to be seen. Schulz frames this not as a dramatic crisis, but as a quiet emotional isolation that many young viewers recognized without fully ever understanding as to why. Growing up in Australia, where Christmases unfolded under blazing sun rather than falling snow, I still felt that same emotional distance years after the fact. The season promised warmth, togetherness, and certainty, but often delivered something much more complicated and far less defined. Charlie Brown's confusion validated those feelings without needing to resolve them neatly. What makes this melancholy so enduring is that it never portrayed it as something to be fixed. Instead, it exists as a normal part of a childhood experience, especially during emotionally charged times like Christmas. Schulz doesn't mock Charlie Brown for his sensitivity, nor does he overly reward it. He simply allows it to breathe. That creative decision gives this special its emotional honesty. The viewer isn't instructed to pity Charlie Brown so much as to quietly sit with him, to feel alongside him as he searches for a meaning he can't yet articulate. In doing so, A Charlie Brown Christmas becomes less a holiday story and more an emotional snapshot of childhood itself, uncertain, earnest, and filled with questions that don't always have answers. One of the most striking qualities of A Charlie Brown Christmas is its refusal to smooth over roughness. whether emotional, technical, or aesthetic. The animation is simple, often stiff, and deeply human. Characters pause awkwardly, movements feel slightly off kilter, and faces hold expressions just a beat longer than expected. Rather than detracting from the experience, these imperfections give the special its heart. They ground it in a handmade sincerity that feels increasingly rare nowadays. The same is true for the voice acting. The children sound like children, not performers or actors delivering polished lines, but kids thinking as they speak, occasionally stumbling through dialogue with an authenticity that cannot be recreated. As someone who has cherished Peanuts, much like many others who grew up around the same time as me, this lack of gloss feels deeply aligned with its worldview. It reinforces the idea that real emotion is rarely tidy, and that warmth comes from not perfection, but from honesty. This philosophy is embodied most clearly in the Christmas tree itself. Charlie Brown's choice of the smallest, most unassuming tree feels like an extension of his inner self. He gravitates toward it not out of rebellion, but out of empathy. He sees something fragile and overlooked and instinctively wants to protect it. When the tree collapses under the weight of a single ornament, the moment cuts deeper than its simplicity could ever suggest. It's not just a visual gag, it's a recognition of how easily gentle things can be crushed by expectation. Watching this as an Aussie, where Christmas trees often stood artificial and pristine in overheated living rooms, the symbolism still resonated. It wasn't ever about realism, it was about vulnerability. I didn't need a snowy forest to understand the idea of something small struggling to survive amidst louder, flashier alternatives. And yet, the special doesn't linger in despair. The other children eventually rally around the tree, decorating it carefully, transforming it not into something grand, but into something cherished. That distinction matters. The tree isn't fixed by becoming impressive, it's embraced as it is. This moment encapsulates Schultz's quiet optimism that care, when applied sincerely, has the power to restore meaning. In that act, the group unknowingly answers Charlie Brown's emotional question. Christmas isn't about performing joy correctly, it's about recognizing value in humility, togetherness, and effort. The imperfect tree becomes a symbol, not of failure, but of the beauty that emerges when people choose gentleness over judgment. What truly elevates a Charlie Brown Christmas beyond seasonal entertainment is its willingness to embrace stillness in a medium often defined by noise. The pacing slows deliberately, allowing scenes to breathe and silences to linger. This restraint reaches its emotional peak when Linus steps forward to recite the nativity story. There is no swelling choir, no dramatic lighting, just a child speaking plainly, removing his blanket for the first time, as if the act itself requires vulnerability. As an Aussie, distanced from the snowbound cultural imagery surrounding this moment, the clarity of it still landed with quiet force. It didn't feel exclusionary or doctrinal, it felt grounding. In a world increasingly dominated by commercial urgency, this pause, a genuine stillness, felt almost radical. It reframed the entire special, not as a critique of Christmas traditions, but as a gentle reminder of why they exist at all. That quiet continues as Charlie Brown walks away with the tree, framed against the winter night. The music softens, the animation becomes minimal, and for a moment the world seems to exhale. This scene, more than any other, transcends cultural boundaries because despite never experiencing a white Christmas, I personally felt connected to that sense of resolution. It was not about weather or setting, but about internal calmness. The relief of finally understanding that meaning doesn't need to be chased or to be proven. It only needs to be acknowledged. Schultz allows the emotional payoff to arrive softly, without exclamation marks or overt triumph. Charlie Brown doesn't suddenly become confident or popular, he simply finds peace in knowing what matters to him. That ending affirms the special's most profound idea, that Christmas, at its most meaningful, is a quiet experience. It is found in reflection rather than spectacle, in sincerity rather than performance. Whether you are surrounded by snowdrifts or celebrating under a blazing summer sky, that truth will always remain unchanged. A Charlie Brown Christmas endures decades after because it respects its audience enough to slow down to trust emotional intelligence and to suggest, rather than declare, what the season can be. It leaves spaces for the viewer to fill in their own memories, their own doubts, and their own definitions of joy, and in that space, it has truly become timeless. What makes a Charlie Brown Christmas endure decade after decade is not just nostalgia alone, but its unwavering confidence in emotional quietude. It never raises its voice to earn attention, never insists upon its importance, and never reshapes itself to match the ever louder rhythms of modern holiday entertainment. Instead, it remains exactly as it has always been, soft-spoken, slightly hesitant, and utterly sincere. As someone who loves Peanuts, from the moment I could first remember watching them to even now as a fully grown adult, revisiting this special each year feels less like indulging in tradition and more like reconnecting with an emotional truth I sometimes forget even exists. Even viewed from Australia, where December heat presses down instead of snow falling gently into silence, the emotional temperature of this story remains perfectly calibrated. It understands that Christmas is as much about inward reflection as outward celebration, and that those who feel out of step with the season's expectations are not broken, they are simply paying attention. There is a profound generosity in how this story makes room for uncertainty. Charlie Brown never transforms into a more confident or accomplished version of himself. He doesn't conquer doubt or silence it entirely. Instead, he learns to coexist with it, and that lesson is quietly passed on to the viewer. Over time, that message has only deepened in significance. In adulthood, Christmas often arrives with heavier emotional baggage, obligations, absences, nostalgia sharpened by time. Yet, a Charlie Brown Christmas continues to approach the season with the same gentle humility, reminding us that sincerity doesn't age, and that emotional honesty requires no spectacle to become meaningful. Watching it now, years removed from my childhood couch and living still in a climate that defies its wintry imagery, I find myself more moved than ever by its simple restraint. It doesn't offer solutions, it offers understanding. It doesn't demand joy, it suggests peace. And perhaps that is why this special feels so singular even now. It trusts silence, trusts vulnerability, and trusts the audience to meet it halfway. In doing so, it becomes less a holiday program and more a holiday companion. One that returns each year not to tell us how to feel, but to sit with us while we figure it out ourselves. Under soaring summer skies or dim winter evenings, a Charlie Brown Christmas holds the same quiet truth, that gentleness is never a weakness, that imperfection deserves care, and that meaning often arrives not in grand gestures, but in moments of stillness. It is a true reminder that Christmas, at its purest, is not about becoming something better, it is always about remembering what was already there.